The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart.
Hello, and welcome to It's Your Voice, the show that hosts enriching conversations in diversity. My name is Bahia Yackzan. I am a core alignment coach, an emotional wisdom training specialist, and a diversity educator. And I'm delighted and honored to have a platform that I can use every week to showcase innovative ideas that are not mainstreamed yet. Perspectives and voices from different backgrounds. And I always learn every single week. And I hope my listeners and viewers are enjoying this as much as I am. I have designed programs and classes that help others recognize patterns that we have internalized that are biased and hurt other people so that we can learn how to step out of them and really increase the joy in our lives by creating new ways of seeing other choices, developing new patterns that are more inclusive. So if you're interested in any of my classes or workshops, you can go to knowwhatyouvantcoaching.wordpress.com. And I also am just really delighted today to have a guest who is a very innovative, brilliant thinker who has developed several things. But before I bring on my today's guest, because this is the last Wednesday of Women's History Month, the month recognizing women in history, I have to mention the name of a woman truly making history right now. And that is the Supreme Court Justice nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is currently a judge in the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. And I just really feel a deep honor for her and admiration, not only because she's exceptionally well qualified to become a Supreme Court justice, but also she's clearly demonstrated maintaining incredible grace and dignity under pressure. So there's a shout out to her. And now I get to introduce Lynne Bryan Phipps, who has done a number of amazing things. She studied design at Auburn University and the Rhode Island School of Design. And long before sustainability practices in architecture were recognized, she had been designing and has a degree in the highest standard of sustainability in design, and which I want to talk about. And also she was the founder of a school called the Compass School, which was one of the first, or perhaps the first, project-based learning schools that also emphasized the importance of sustainability and taking care of the planet. And now the focus of today's program is an innovative therapy called Integrative Equine Therapy that was her most recent brainchild. And we have some photos. And I just want to mention now that one reason that I'm excited about it is because it's extremely effective with PTSD. And the head of the board of Beechwood Integrative Equine Therapy, Whitney Bailey, was very enthusiastic about this because it is so effective for combat veterans. And Lynne, thank you for being here. There's so much more I could say about your background. And And I want you to go ahead and add what you want to now at the beginning before we dive into our conversation.
No, I think you did a wonderful job, Bahia. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's an honor to have you here. And I
Pleasure
got
to be here.
so I have so many questions. It's so exciting. And I also we do have some photos which we'll bring up in a little bit, thanks to Roxy, our wonderful sound engineer. So I think one fun place to start is, first of all, asking, how did this idea come to you? And I know you mentioned the equine therapy. There are other forms that are on the ground, but to me, and probably to a lot of people, the idea of on the ground, the people being on the ground, is like really new. And yet yours is still unique. So I always love to hear, how did this come to you? I know you've been an equestrian for many, many years. So if you could just start with that story, that would be.
Sure, absolutely. So for me, the power of horses healing came to me because of one particular horse. And if you go to our website and look at our staff, we list our horses and our human staff equally. And but the first horse that really was so demonstrative about the work that he did is Raja. He's we work only with warm bloods in our particular therapy, and he is his sire is the top breeding stallion in the US the years during the time period when he was born. And so his name is Raja. He's by royal prince, Raja being royal prince in India. And that's a part of the breeding and the bloodlines, and the way that we track bloodlines and everything has everything to do with how we know these horses. Raja, I was looking for my first upper level dressage partner. Dressage, a lot of people think of as dancing with horses. It's also originates in the movements that we trained to take people to war. So back in the 15th and the 13th centuries, when people were protecting their boundaries and warring over principalities. So you sort of think knights in shining armor kind of days. These were the horses that were very intentionally bred to carry a rider into battle. And the reason that that's relevant is because anybody who thinks that we control a horse from the back of their body, when they're well trained, yes, but a horse is way more powerful than any human. And if they're not interested in doing what you're asking them to do, they will go the other way, and they will with or without you. So, so the breeding and the ability for a horse to override their own fight or flight instincts, to take somebody to war, is pretty significant. But when I was first looking for my upper level dressage partner, I was not thinking about therapy at all. I was thinking about what horse I would want to dance with. And we'd had a lot of what we thought were the right partners. When you do this, you do it with a trainer and with a veterinarian, and everybody's got opinions, and everyone's watching videos, and everybody, you have to go try the horse, and then they have to watch. And when you come to consensus, then the veterinarian does a vet check, and it's kind of like, think of it like a home inspection. If they don't pass, you don't buy the horse. So you get very excited about, you start to develop the idea of being a partner with this animal, and then it either happens or it doesn't. So we were on our fourth or fifth try. Horses didn't pass the vet. And a friend of mine said, I was like, there were two horses in this particular barn with one of the US team members, and who had started both of them. And I didn't know which one. I was very anxious. I was a little bit gun shy at that point, because we'd had so many, what we thought was going to be the horse, and it wasn't. And I called a friend, and she said, well, have you asked them? And I thought, well, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? And so I went out and I hung out. I know, exactly. So I went out, they were both in each of their own very large, like 2-acre paddocks. And I went out with the first one, which is chestnut, like a redhead. And I hung with him and I was like, yeah, this is really nice. And it seems really fine. And everybody's good. And then I walked to the gate of the other horse, which is a gray, if you see him on our website. And I walked to the gate and he was at the far end of the field, just like the chestnut was. And I got to the gate and I opened the gate and he looked up and I started to walk toward him and he started to walk toward me. And we met in the middle of the field and he put his head on my heart and I burst into tears. It was so clear that he was saying, no, I pick you. It's not, it's not, this is kind of cool or this is kind of nice. It was so clearly that it brought an enormous amount of emotion out of me. And so he was the horse I vetted and he was the horse that I purchased. And as I started to develop that partnership, every time I turned around, he was showing me something like as if he could talk to me. And when he was doing all these different things that showed me what was going on, it made me start to think of other horses that I had owned or that had met me at different points in my personal growth as well as my equestrian growth. And I realized that each of them, that there was more to what they were doing than just, being a good boy or a good girl to, do what I was asking them to do. Mm. And that caused me to realize the healing power of horses. And as I started to write about that and think about that and clarify that, it became very evident to me that I needed to figure out how to bring the healing power of horses to people who didn't have access to healing. And that, the other piece of that is you don't really want to be on a horse when you're processing something like anxiety or trauma or fear or, PTSD or any of the things that we help people process. We help people with fibromyalgia, chronic pain, anxiety, depression, disordered eating, like all different kinds of things. And if you're taking somebody into the place of those kinds of thoughts and feelings, the safest place is not on top of a horse. The safest place is on the ground with a horse. And then the other thing that became very important to me in this process as a designer, oftentimes during the early stages of sustainable design and sustainable building practices, we needed a lot of evidence to convince a client that doing something that was good for the planet was good for their business. And so we did a lot with data collection. And the one thing that I can tell you is when I started to think that horses were doing something special, I knew it's at least in a therapeutic way. I was pretty fearful that people would think, oh, that's that crazy lady over there. She thinks horses are doing something, but we don't really know. And so I thought we've got to have a way of making sure that it's measurable, that we can show concrete evidence that something's happening. How can we do that? Otherwise, it's not going to have legs and we're not going to be able to really develop something that's sustainable. So that was a very important early stage achievement, was that Brown University took a professor in the Department of Public Health, took a significant interest in the work that we were doing and set up the data collection and the IRB and all of the, the correct scientific ways of collecting data, making sure we're not using humans as guinea pigs and, all of those things. So that has meant that since 2017, there has been data collected on every client that we have, de-identified data that shows the significance of their progress.
That's fantastic to have that backing.
Yes, it's been amazing. And that has led to the VA being interested in what we do for suicide prevention. So different things have grown from that original data.
So I lost a couple of words. You said the Veterans Association has taken interest
VA.
in
the Providence VA, the researchers associated with the VA have decided that they want to study what we do for suicide prevention in a veteran population, combat veteran population.
That is really good news. And I know that's why, yeah, there so many people appreciate that. And um, can you share some of the statistics that are and some of the data for listeners who might want to hear, oh, what is some of the data that's been collected since 2017? Just even if it's in, just give us a
Well,
concept.
a couple of things that I'd like to let people know, and that is, and these are significant. This is not necessarily our data, but it reflects our population. It reflects the U.S. population. But 70% of adults in the U.S. have experienced a traumatic event in their lifetime. And what we know about trauma or stress is that when we have a traumatic event or stress-related experience, it's stored in the brain separate from short and long-term memory and conscious thought. And that's important because it's stored at the age and stage you were when it first happened. So if you think about it, and I like to use this example because this is, when we say trauma, it sounds big and scary and like, well, I haven't had trauma, or there isn't anything traumatic in my life, so why do I have anxiety, or why is this affecting me? And I like to use this example because there are a lot of us who have experienced it. So if you think about a 4 or 5-year-old who's going to kindergarten or first grade or preschool, and they get their pretty new dress or their, new outfit, and they get their new lunchbox, and we get them their backpack to take them to school, and everybody's excited. Now, is mom usually a little bit anxious? Probably. Does she let anybody know she's anxious? Probably not, right? But kids are designed to pick up on that. And they're also designed to try to figure out how to get through whatever mom says they're supposed to get through. If there's not space to say, I don't like this idea. Why do I have to go? What do you mean? You're not going to be there all day long, and I'm going to meet all these new people and all these new things. And you can just imagine, the anxiousness building. But if it's not safe to talk about it, which for many of us, the signal we send our kids is, it's going to be fun. Let's not talk about how scary it is, right? Then they process it as trauma. It gets stored in the body as stress. And when it gets stored in that separate part of our brain, it's only as old as they are when it first happened. And that means that anytime anything like what happened then happens again, right? So I'm anxious about going to Boy Scouts. I'm anxious about going to school. I'm anxious about COVID. I'm anxious about whatever. You can just 15 other things when you're that little. Millions of other things can feel like that thing that happened. The part of you that shows up is 4 or 5. You only have access to the age-appropriate coping strategies you have when you're 4 or 5. Now, you're 15, you're 25, you're in college, all of a sudden, the part of you that shows up when that social situation that feels big and scary happens is 4 or 5. You don't have access to all of your coping strategies. You don't have access to all of your tools. You only are little. We help to build a bridge from the trauma part of your brain to the conscious part of your brain, where you can actually have access to all of your coping strategies. And the data shows that it's an average of 7 sessions. So the actuarial tables will tell you for the insurance companies that if you have anxiety disorder and it's going to, and you seek help, insurance is going to count on it taking 18 months to 2 years, talk therapy and medication. And with us, it's 7 sessions. Remarkably, consistently, 7 sessions. And for us, that's under 3 months.
That is remarkable. And I can imagine the difference that makes for families. And that makes me, first, I want to acknowledge there was a great question, but I really, after that, would like to go to the photos, because there's several pictures of clients who are willing to be photographed. And and allow the use because they have so much positive reviews to say of how effective the family. But there's one of the little girl holding a sign about her daddy that's just, it's so heartwarming. So I wonder, Roxy, could you flash that question? Thank you. Suzanne Jewell saying, this is amazing. Do you train others to learn these modalities?
So one of the beautiful things about our
Suzanne.
process is that it is replicable. So our goal was to develop, my goal was to develop something that could spread throughout the country, or that I could train other people to do it, because only one person can only see so many people. So yes, we've been training other integrative equine therapists to do this work. And we're happy, there's a fee obviously associated with that. And, but you can do amazing work in your area.
Thank you for that. Roxy, do you mind showing the, I guess if you can just kind of summarize each photo as it comes up. Thank you.
So this is a photo of a particular client who was working with, that's Raja, the gray horse. So one of the things that the horses do is they show us what's going on inside of a person. When we sync a horse and a human, we can literally see what's going on inside of them by watching the horse. So when we train integrative equine therapists, we obviously train them in our technique, and our steps, but then we also train them to be able to listen and read the horses. So in that particular photo, Raja, the client had laid down, the client had squatted down and was chanting Om. So she was really she'd been 3 or 4 sessions into her treatment, and she was in a really good place. And as soon as she really started to get super quiet and settled, he laid down. And I don't know how many of you know horses very well, but multiple horses in a herd will not lay down at the same time. So a very significant part of this particular photo is not just Raja in the foreground, but Panda in the background, because in the midst of this experience, he also came over and lay down. And it was like it was a beautiful experience of common, shared, peaceful interaction.
Beautiful. Thanks for the description.
This is Wish, and one of our veteran clients, and this was when he was first getting introduced to our horses. We have a very special way that that people select their horse, the horse that they're going to work with while they do their therapy with us. And that process in and of itself is also a 15th century technique that helps us to listen to our body, not our mind. We're a mind, body, spirit approach. And our goal is always to integrate the mind, the body, and the spirit. And oftentimes our culture teaches us to listen to what our head thinks and not really to listen to what our body thinks, and very oftentimes to completely ignore the part of us, our soul self, that we don't really see. So it's easier to just sort of pinch off. So
that is so true.
Yeah. This is an experience of another one of our clients who had some really significant trauma as a child, very young child. She's adopted, and you can see how the horses are standing with her, and Raja's actually standing, wrapping her to just hold her.
That is so sweet. Yeah, totally. Yeah. It looks like the horse is taking care of her.
Absolutely. And so as the client processes what's going on, the horses will come close or farther away based on what's going on, and show her when she gets more and more connected and integrates apart by coming closer and closer. The other thing that's happening, or that's noteworthy about this photo, as is all of them, is that we do not use, all of our work is done at what we call at liberty. That means the horse is completely free to move, and that's significant too. So we don't hold or restrain any of our horses, nor do we hold or restrain any of our clients as they're, going through their process. It's a beautiful dance. This is another photo this is Raja again, with a little girl who is also a military child. So secondary trauma for families of veterans is a significant experience, and helping children and caregivers is part of our work.
That's fantastic.
This is just a photo of a visit of veterans, hidden heroes, which is what we call veteran caregivers for the Elizabeth Dole Foundation, and some of our political leaders in our community. This was in Rhode Island at our Rhode Island Center.
And go ahead.
And this is another client. Up in the winter time, we see clients in both locations year round. So we right now have a center in Florida and a center in Rhode Island, and we're opening a center outside of Pennsylvania, outside Philadelphia and Delaware, between Philadelphia and the Chesapeake, and outside of Boston. So yes, we're excited about training and opening more and more places.
That's fantastic. I'm so happy you made it replicable.
Yes, this is a young lady from California who came to do some work with us. So we do what are called intensives for people who come from a distance. We can do 7 sessions in 4 days or a week, depending on how much time they have. And this is an example of someone who was experiencing the wildfires in California, or experienced the wildfires after she did her work on anxiety. And she gives us a beautiful testimonial that's available, I think, on YouTube, about how the work that she did with us made it possible for her to survive, and then, the evacuations and all that stuff in her area, and not be anxious.
Yeah, that is a very traumatic experience.
Yes. Anytime, it's obvious that experiences that are life or death experiences are traumatic, right? So, yeah. And if we already have anxiety or depression or panic attacks, or, any kind of something that we're already keenly aware, makes it that much bigger.
Here's another
This
photo.
is another, so this young lady is part of a film by Sesame Street Workshop. It's their first docuseries called Through Our Eyes. And this episode, so there are 4 parts. The whole idea behind this docuseries was that it's about children through children's eyes, and its experiences of families in America going through very difficult things. So the first in the series, I think it's the first, is children of parents children who have a parent who's incarcerated. The second is children of parents who are homeless. So families that are homeless, one of the largest difficulties that children in our culture face. Then the third is children of military veterans, and that was the one that we are featured in, or part of this young lady's healing process. And then the fourth was children of, there are 4 of them. I'll remember.
Okay. And there's one more picture.
It's a fantastic, I recommend it to everybody. It's a really powerful series.
And so would you name the series again, please?
Through Our Eyes. And our episode is the home front episode. So that's why it says Through Our Eyes, home front. It's available on HBO Max.
Okay. Good to know. And that last photo.
Yeah, that's our center in Rhode Island. That's up by the road. And we do a lot with veterans, a lot with adults and children. We see people age 8 to 80. So
Fantastic. I'm thinking about how on your website you do have the horses introduced as staff, and that's so not normal to give them the same status as human beings. That when I was looking through it, I was like, oh, there's a horse. So like, oh, the
yeah,
horse are the staff. Of course, the horse are the staff, and how
absolutely.
wonderful for them to be photographed and named and partnered.
Yes.
So that was
As I said before, we only work with warm bloods because of the bloodlines and the way that they connect with people. We also know each horse's history, life history. So we know their bloodline history back to the 13th or the 15th century, depending on the breed. We know their life history, and there's no trauma in any of their life histories. And that's significant to us because in our data collection, how do we know it's not the horse's trauma showing up? And that question gets eliminated when we know their life story. And then the last but not least, we don't work with any horses. We don't ask any horse to do this work with humans that doesn't want to. So we spend quite a bit of time with them, doing work with them before they work with any clients, and find out if they like it. Because just like you or me, if we didn't like what we were doing, we wouldn't do it very well or very long. We just lose interest. And these horses, our sessions are 90 minutes long, and they stay profoundly connected throughout the time that they're with their clients.
I'm wondering, like, as a coach, myself as a core alignment coach and emotional wisdom training specialist, I find, and I've done previous like people support work. I was a crisis intervention person and trainer, and kind of a listener and a peer counselor in a lot of different ways.
Right.
And this form of coaching I love because it actually gives me energy. I actually feel energized.
I feel the same way.
Throughout and after the session, just as I'm just as happy, and I've had just as good an uplifting shift as my clients have. And and I see you're nodding, you feel the same way. How about
Absolutely.
the horses? Do you feel like the horses are energized by it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what and other people that I've trained and that now are doing the work have said to me, I didn't understand what you were saying, because they get a little anxious that it's going to be exhausting, or it's 90 minutes is a long time to hold space, and I'm trying to remember exactly the way this other person said it, but she said, I remember you saying that the horse helps, but I had no idea how much having a partner there was going to matter. Yeah,
just part of like holding the presence, holding
space, being present for, supporting as people release and let go of the energy that it takes for those neurons to fire down the neural pathway. I like to think of it as a superhighway. So when you have a neural pathway that's been used a lot, it's like a superhighway, and lots of times that's a great thing. But sometimes it's the kind of thing we wish we didn't have that reaction. We wish that didn't happen so fast before we could stop it. We build the exit ramp from the superhighway that comes from the trauma part of our brain. And you really have to stay present with and keep people connected in that building process. So, and then we slow it down enough that you can get off the exit. If you fly past the exit ramp, you can't get off. So, we're able to just invite the part. We use parts language. It helps people to be aware that it's not all of them. It's a part of them that floods them and causes that reaction rather than a response. So we help create responses.
Right, rather than reactions. And I also deeply appreciate that the horses are not restrained, because that, of course, would impact if I were restrained, and when I was being a support to someone, it would affect how well I could tune into myself. I'd be having to use some of my energy to force down frustration or be distracted by the fact that I don't want to be restrained. Like I could not possibly be present
Right.
if I were restrained.
Right. Yes. And we want our horses to keep themselves safe. That's what they do, right? If there's a predator, the horse's job is to run. And it's not just its own job to run, it's to make sure its whole herd runs, right?
Right.
Horses live in community, actually the way we're designed to live in community and connection. And the beauty of the work is our horses are able to stay present because we keep them connected in their community. We're not asking them to be separate from, we're not asking them to be anything but them. And then from their behavior, they can show us what's going on. Is it big and scary? How big and scary is it? Is it safe? When is it safe? Have we released or let go of something? They show us.
That's fantastic. I want to hear more about that in a second, but I'm thinking about the fact that you also don't separate them from other horses. I'm about to start a workshop this Saturday that's going to run for 8 Saturdays called Embracing Interdependence, because we are an interdependent species.
We are.
And how better everything is when we completely accept it, because we all actually long for it and love it. And horses are the same way, huh? They're interdependent species.
They only survive. I mean, they know that their survival is dependent on their connectivity. And I think that's a big awakening that many people have, because our culture values independence and autonomy and things that sometimes don't feel so good. And, having just come through COVID, as far through COVID as we are, who knows really, but the separation and the isolation was really hard on people, because we're not supposed to feel that way.
No.
And separation and isolation in the midst of all kinds of messages that say it's not safe. How safe is it? We don't know. It's very triggering.
Yes, we've been through a lot and need all kinds of modalities for healing.
Absolutely.
I wanted to ask, before I ask you to repeat, how people can find you and find the information and find the website. And I want to ask make sure I give us a minute to talk about how you help others have access to horses who otherwise would not have access to horses. First, I want to know, share a little bit more about if a horse picks up something from a client that would make the horse want to walk away, or if it was say if I was releasing something toxic, I hit a point, if I were your client, I hit a point where I could suddenly sob or scream or cry as part of a healing process.
Yep.
Is that a situation where horses want to stay and they know what you're doing and they will hang around, or are there times when they go, you know what, I'm walking away? And if that's not when they walk away, when would they walk away? What would they walk away from?
Question. So that's a very good question. So first of all, the horses don't walk away. They just provide space. Okay. So, and there's a big difference. So if they move a little farther away or provide space and continue eating, it's very different from if they move away and they stop eating. Okay. When a horse isn't eating, so horses are designed to eat consistently and pretty constantly. That's how their digestive system works properly. But what's the first thing that happens if there's danger for people? Bahia, what would you do if first thing happened?
Panic, freeze,
hold your breath, right? Hold your breath, right? Look up. Would you stop doing whatever you're doing? Right? So horses do the same thing. They will not eat because they need to be ready to go. Right? Their greatest safety is in being able to flee. Right? That's their power. They also will hold their breath. And both of those things, when those things happen, adrenaline and cortisol are running through their veins. They're getting ready to need to run. right? As soon as a horse knows that they don't need to run, so one horse in a herd notices something, stops eating. Before they even raise their head, every horse knows and is looking up. That's connection. And it's the most beautiful thing when you see a herd of horses prepare to run or actually start to run, when you actually, from what they think is a predator, to see the wave go through the herd, it's like a visible experience of exactly the energy that we're talking about. Okay.
Wow.
Now, that doesn't, we work with horses one-on-one with a client, because having a whole herd of horses around you is overwhelming. And our goal is not to have you in an overwhelmed place. Our goal is to have you in a very safe place. So one-on-one with a horse, though, does not mean that every horse in the next paddock or in the next stall isn't keenly still connected, right? They can stay connected 700 yards away. They do not need to be right next to each other to stay connected. So what we read and what's important is to notice when they stop eating, when they give us space. Space doesn't mean I'm leaving you. Space means what, and that's a key. That's a moment where an IET therapist will say, what are you aware of? And almost always something came to someone's mind. The horse gave space. We lead them through the process. The horse releases either through the breath, shaking head, chewing, licking, all of these different signals that let us know. Because the other thing that a horse will always do, something humans don't do so well anymore, is as soon as they're aware that it's safe, they let go. They let go of the energy that they hold on to and go back to rest. We don't do that very well. We hold. What? Is it happening? Is it going to happen again? How do I know if it's going to happen again? What do I do if it's going to happen again? Right? And that holding is exactly what gets us into trouble.
Yes.
That's what we help people to know what it feels like to actually let go again and actually go back to a relaxed state and be connected, mind, body, and spirit, in that relaxation, so that then we know when we are in fight or flight or when a part is up.
Wow. So I'm getting more of a feeling for it, that it's almost like they're channeling your energy.
Yes.
It's almost like a vehicle or a vessel for the energy goes through them.
It's a beautiful
And they're
dance.
like, oh, that needs to be released.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. That's phenomenal. I'm realizing we have one or possibly two videos and just 6 minutes left. So, so I'll ask you the question about access and to, repeat the information afterwards. If Roxy is ready to show a video, let us know if we have one or two. That's be great to see some action. Oh, great. Thank you.
First time? Really? How's that feel? Excited. Really excited because I get to see a horse and I haven't for like a year.
Really? What's scary about it?
He's big, really big.
Wow, that was so cute. I feel like if I heard correctly, the little girl was saying right after the little girl talked about something being scary, the horse walked over and nosed her, like put her nose gently on the girl's face.
The horses will always show us where we hold.
That's
Well,
amazing.
literally, if I could, we don't have data, collected data on this, but I will tell you 99% of the time, I don't want to say 100 because there might be one that I'm not thinking of, but but the horse will touch somebody someplace, and I will ask the question, where is the part holding after? And they'll say, right there. And
Wow.
so the horse will show us, yep, you got to let go right there. Take a deep breath. Let's move. Let's let it move. Yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm realizing we have like a little bit less than 4 minutes. And I know the listeners on the radio can't see this, but you can check it out later on YouTube, on Talk4 TV on YouTube, if you want to see the visuals. So do we have time for the second video and then another minute to wrap up? Yes. Okay. Let's do the second video. Thank you, Roxy.
Just noticing whatever parts have something to say. Something came up. Yeah. Just noticing. Let me know what you got. Totally tell. What'd you get?
Just
Where'd you feel it in your body?
feeling it in my stomach.
Okay.
Now all that I can feel is a feeling of just very intense, like the like knee-jerk like fight or flight reaction.
Yeah.
Like just like fear.
And doesn't that make sense that you feel it in your tummy?
Yeah.
I just want you to breathe towards it. And that's why Raja gave you his fanny. His head was over there. He's thinking, how do I get out?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just noticing. Just noticing as if you can wrap the part that holds the fear in your tummy, just wrap it in love. Higher self, soul self. Just feeling what it feels like to be connected. Knowing that it floods you, right?
Yeah.
That overwhelming sense was the flooding. Then just turn towards. Just breathing and noticing. Ask how old or how young. What's the part that got so scared? Does it feel blocked? Or are you just with it? Eight.
Yeah.
Awesome. How do you feel towards an 8-year-old that's that scared?
I feel
Wow. I just keep wanting to interpret, like, it's interesting because the horse by the end was like the body was touching the person.
Yeah.
There was space, and then was like, and like just stopped eating, like to check out, okay, what's going on, and then just went back to eating. Fascinating. But I know we have only 1 minute left. Oh my gosh, this is so rich. And can you say, we'll say the website again and the email, but the fact that I know that some of the sessions are free, and you and the Whitney Bailey, the head of the board, want to make sure people, combat veterans and families, have access. Can you say something about that?
Yes, combat veterans and their families have free access to our work, as do what we call community clients. So folks who cannot afford services. First of all, insurance doesn't cover what we do. Just it's not that progressive yet. So, or insurance isn't that progressive yet, even though our rates of healing are far faster than so many other things. But so folks who, we have a list of community, we have what we call community clients, and those are folks who a doctor, a nurse practitioner, a mental health professional, or a community like a rabbi or a minister can vouch for someone and say, yes, they can't afford to pay. And then, as we're able, we fit everybody in. Obviously, we have to do that on a percentage basis. We've got to see clients who can pay to help pay the bills. So, but our goal is to always give people the opportunity to heal the fastest way possible.
And the email address is info@beachwood, beach like BEACH, wood,
Right.
and then RI.org, RI as in Rhode Island.
Yes.
And the website is the same, www.beachwoodri.org. And this is the Reverend Lynne, who I'm sorry I didn't acknowledge your
Okay.
master's in divinity, and you've done a lot of spiritual work, and you are an ordained minister. I apologize I didn't acknowledge that before.
That's okay.
So we're out of time. Thank you so much. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, Roxy, our sound engineer. Thank you, Reverend Lynne Bryan Phipps.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And thank you, listeners and viewers. And be sure to tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. at Talk4 TV or w4cyradio.com. And may we all have enriching conversations in diversity this week.
Yes. And thank you for the wonderful work that you do, Bahia. Thank you.
Inarticulate speech, inarticulate speech of the heart. Inarticulate speech